Hello Internet, I'm Guy. This is the second and final video in a series documenting the construction of a tensegrity structure. Tensegrity refers to designs that incorporate tension steel cables, doesn't have to be steel, that support objects in space using only cables and no structural members. So that's what's really cool about this project is, as you can see on my right here, the four cables support the upper section. The center cable is holding the upper section up. The three outer cables are pulling it down, and they counteract each other to create a stable structure. So stay tuned and I'll show you how I finish this up. The final parts I need to make will be these little guide blocks in here that are the tensioning blocks that will be tightened by this bolt and pull the tension wire through this hole. So I've got a chunk of metal here that is enough to make those three pieces. It's too thick, so I'm going to have to machine it down, and it's also too wide deliberately, so I can machine it to fit these slots and ride in the slots. So let's get to that. I've got this strip mounted in the vise, and I'm going to just take off 10 thou to get this nice and trued up, and then I'll take off the edge here to get it down to dimension. I'm using a larger cutter than I need to, but I like this cutter. Okay, my final pass there was a couple of thou, just to tidy it up and make it look pretty, because look how pretty that is. Nice interference pattern on there. It's a little off on the sides, I'm not sure why. I've got it flipped over. I'm going to keep taking more off until I get enough thickness removed that it will fit within the channel. Okay, I've got this flipped over so that I'm cutting off the edge here. I'm going to true this edge and then reduce this other edge down to fit into the slot. Okay, I've swapped out to my favorite 1/2" carbide bit. I'm going to take about 100 thou off of here, so I'm going to start off by trying to take 50 thou off, see if that'll work. And here we go. Now I can cut in the reverse direction because it's not going to throw chips that far. Okay, let's check that dimension and see what we've got here. Yeah, that'll do. That'll be a nice clearance in a 1/2" slot. Now I've got this machine down to size. It will drop in beautifully and clear and move fine. So I'm going to cut it up into three pieces here. And this will now go in there so that this bolt will pull it in. That'll tension it. This bolt will secure the guide cable, and it'll go up through there. So I've got to round over the end there a little bit so that I can pull it in a bit further. I'm going to start by drilling the holes for the cables, setting it up on a parallel to get the height right, and then my magnetic parallel holder will sit here, and that will also function as a stop, so I can do repeating passes on the three different items and get that set up right there. There's the other two ready to go. So I'm going to use my centering drill and then go through all three of these and center them first, and then I can drill them. And I'm using this stop at the end, a magnetic parallel holder, to hold them all. So now I'm drilling them out. This will be for a 632 tapping hole size. And drilling through number 2 and number 3. And then I'm setting up my tap guide in the drill with the tap guide up in a collet, as you can see. Get those holes nice and true, the tapping here. Little WD-40 goes a long way with tapping. It really makes it easier. So there we are, got that backed out. Now I've got to drill the holes in the ends here for a 632 bolt that will pull these tensioning blocks in from the outside edge. So I'm using a parallel on the left to get them squared up and the holder on the right. And I'm going to use my electronic edge finder, which I recently made a video about. So I'm easing up against the surface there, and boom, there we go, found that edge. So simple. I really like that tool. Again, going with the center finding bit, and I'm using my DRO, so I'm actually centered up on the block first. And then I'm going to increment over using the DRO to find the centers of the other two blocks here. But, oops, there, I just dropped that center finding bit, but I'm swapping out. Because I have a keyless chuck, it's very easy to swap out these bits and just do 2 passes per block and then move on to the next one. In some cases, I would have actually used the DRO and done all the center finding first and then all the drilling second, but this just works out better with the keyless chuck. This is a particularly deep hole, so I'm making sure and keeping it well lubricated because it's a tapping hole. I want a nice clean hole. So once again, I have the tap wrench in a tap guide, and that helps guide this in. And of course, I'm going to have to go in pretty far here. So I'm going to round over this end so that it will fit into the radius of the slot. And the best way to do that is to mark it off like this with a little template. Get that centered on there-ish. And scribe a little line. So I've knocked off the corners on my bandsaw, and I'll just round this over roughly now. So it looks like this is going to work just great. As you can see, if I tighten this bolt right here, it'll pull in like that. This is a star drive stainless steel screw because I want a lot of torque on that to grab the cable here. And there are going to be 3 cables all passing through here, which is going to be kind of interesting. But I'm pretty pleased so far. The only thing I hadn't figured on is that the head up here is sticking out beyond what is the actual bottom of the base here. So I noticed in the original design there were rubber feet on 3 corners, and that's one way to get the head clearance. So I'm going to add some rubber feet there, which will look nice anyway. So problem solved. So now all the parts are complete and laid out. It's ready to start assembling. So these 2 legs I've marked on the bottom with a stamp A and B, and so I'm going to take the A leg so I know which one goes where, and screw that on with a flathead screw. This is of course the top because it's a thinner piece of aluminum. And you see the piece of cork in the background there. That's what I'm going to use to cover the screw heads because I don't like the look of exposed screw heads on the top. The original design that I'm copying did have screws showing the top, and I just think that's just gauche. The bottom side isn't particularly clean, and I had some bluing got caught in those little areas there, and then I shellacked over it, and it's trapped there now. So it's the bottom side of the top where most people aren't going to be looking. I'm not too concerned about that. Of course, here's the cork again that's going to be glued onto there. Now the bottom. So I'm using Phillips panhead screws and stainless steel screws again because I need the strength to support the tension that's going to be involved here. I don't know how many pounds of force will be involved, but I want to be secure here. So these are Phillips head, panhead. Got to get my screwdriver, there it is. Setting that one in loosely and then lining the second one. And then I'm going to back off and really torque those down again because of the tension. You could say that I'm paying attention. This is looking good. I'm really pleased. So lining them up. This is how they will go together. And I'm thinking an air gap between those 2 middle pins of about 3 inches. I don't want to go too long, and too short doesn't look right either. So the happy medium, the Goldilocks length, is I think around 3 inches. So now I have to start attaching the cable. I got this spool of cable when I purchased the cutting tool and the crimping tool here. And so I'll need to use it as a cutter first to cut off that little crimp that I put on the end of the wire when I was testing it. And now I'm going to grab a ferrule, slide it onto the wire. One has to remember to do that first if you're going to feed this through and make a loop, as you'll see here. So this is going to drop in there. It's a little fiddly to get this done. And those little wires, I just want to get those all tidied up so they're not loose, because they won't go back in through the ferrule here. There it is. Getting that slid on, and then I'm going to tension that up a little bit, take out some of the slack. A little bit fiddly. There we go. Now I've got it slack taken out, and I can crimp it. I'm using the second to the smallest crimping slots in this tool, and I'm going to crimp in 2 locations because the ferrule is longer than the crimping tool. There we go. First commitment. Yes, that feels nice and sturdy. All right, so now I've got to figure out how much cable to cut off. Let me get my scale in here. And I figure, 4 inches, maybe a bit more to have wiggle room to fool around with. I'm going to go 4.5, maybe 5 inches. Cut that off again. So now, of course, this is going to loop through the other one. I'm going to drop it in there. Notice I'm forgetting to put the ferrule in there first, which, yeah, it will loop around. Oh, there we go. Yeah, got that right. So back in there very carefully. This is kind of fussy. And then getting that down through there. Looped around and back through. Take up the slack. Hopefully I don't see any little bits of wire sticking out beyond the ferrule. And I'm going to do 2, maybe 3 crimps here to really cover the entire section there, because the tool just isn't wide enough to do it all. That's 2, and then that's 3. All right, so now we're getting towards tensegrity. I think I like that spacing. That looks good to me, just aesthetically. So now looking at it, oh, wait a minute, I see something. Do you see it? That hole doesn't line up. I messed up somewhere where I mounted the top leg in the wrong position. So let's think about this. I must have flipped it over. That's what I did. So what I can do is move these 2 holes over to here, and I just have some ugly holes on the bottom side at some point, but it's the best solution. The cork will hide the holes on the top. So again, if I just put those over there, that should work. So now I need to mark new holes for the other support, the top support, starting with that right there. Not exactly where I wanted it, but it will work. And what I have now is I have a gauge here measuring the distance between the 2 holes. So now I've got those both marked off, and I'll go ahead and punch that out and drill it out. There we are. So, problem solved. I'm using hex head, flathead screws, bolts, and I'm going to put this on here like this. Put that in there by hand. Oh wait, no, I have it backwards. That's Mr. Dyslexic to you, the bane of my existence. All right, get that in the right way around now. Just tighten that down a little bit. I'm not going to over tighten that until I get the second one in. Get that lined up, dropped in. Twirl that one in. Now I'm going to wrench it down tight because, again, tensegrity requires this structural connection right here for sure. Now that's the spacing. That's looking pretty good. I'm really pleased with how that came out. So now what I have to do is install the other 3 cables, which means putting them in the base here. So I'm starting by taking a length of cable and pushing it through the top section here where it'll wrap around that pin at the top. Pulling enough out there. And I'm going to slide the ferrule down onto the cable so it'll come essentially up from the bottom end of the cable. There it is. And then if I tidy this end up so that it's clean, pull a little bit more out, flip it around, tuck it through so it's wrapped around that pin, and then pull it out. Hopefully there'll be just enough, yes there is, just enough there that I can slide this up on there and capture both cables in the ferrule. There we go. And reaching in for the crimping tool, I'm going to use the second to smallest crimp slot. And I'm going for 3 crimps here to make sure it's fully and firmly crimped. It's not particularly pretty, but if someone's looking at that really closely, they're looking in the wrong place in my mind. So now I'm going to put all the tensioning adjusters in here, put a few turns of the screw on that, and put them all 3 in here for now. Oops. So you can see how that rounded end allows me to tension all the way up to the outer edge should I need to. Put the third one in here. And yes, you notice I am in fact fully ambidextrous here. All right, those are all ready to accept cabling. So now I'm thinking about getting this cable in there, and I realized, oh, this is too complicated. I'm going to set up a jig here. This is a piece of 1x6 lumber, and I've got the clamps holding the 2 legs in place. So this will align everything while I pull the cables through, which is going to make it a lot simpler. So here I have that one cable connected. Actually, I have 3 of them, of course, connected to the top. Pull this through. You notice I chamfered that hole, so it'll ride around that corner there. And then I'm going to pull it around the screw head, tension it down, make sure it's crimped around there nicely, and then I'm going to use the star drive, again stainless steel, very strong screw, get a good bite on that, and there we are. I've got all 3 of those in there now. Excess cable hanging out for now. Now I can take out that guide block, and let's see how it all holds up. Wow, yeah, look at that. It's a little wibbly wobbly, but I can tension those cables. But look at that, it's a structure. Look at that, I can just hold it at one end. This is so amazing. Tensegrity, science in action here. So now I can tension these cables down by pulling in the tensioning adjusters, a couple of turns, and I'm going to do more of this off camera, but this is enough to tension it up so it's stiffer. A little bit more will make it even more stiff. So here we are, I've cut the extra cable off, and I'm going to put rubber feet on there because the screws that secure the cable are sticking out below the bottom edge of this plate here. So I just need a little ground clearance, and these were rubber feet that came with a product that I didn't need, so they look fine. They're a little taller than I'd like, but what the heck. So there it is. Still a little wibbly, but I'll tension those cables down a bit more. Now I want to hide the top surface that had the extra 2 holes with this cork here. And also I'm hoping people won't look at the bottom, but who looks at the bottom of the top surface? So I'm going to cut this cork out and glue this on with double stick adhesive. So here it is. It's astonishingly strong and rigid. I mean, I can move it a little bit, and if I bump it, it'll wiggle a little bit, but I could put probably 40 or 50 pounds on here, and this is the cool part. You can just turn it over like that, and it's structurally sound. And of course, this part is really cool looking too. So when I show it off to friends, I'm definitely going to show them the tensioning adjusters in the bottom there. But of course it will sit upside down on the cork if I wanted to show it off that way, but I'm not going to. So I just grab this though. It's so strong and sturdy. It is just astonishing how tensegrity works. It really is. These 4 cables are separating these 2 masses with no mechanical connection between them. How cool is that?